Oh, look at that. Oh, really? Yeah.
Gut reaction. Aloha nerds, and welcome back to the Salawag's Why It's Great Gut Reaction, where I watch things and react from the gut. Welcome back to my Godzilla Movies in Order review. My goal, I'm a filmmaker. I made the 007 I Only Need One short film a few years back. It won some awards. People said some very nice things in the comments. I have taken a break from filmmaking, but my goal is to watch all the Godzilla movies in order and watch some Super Sentai, watch some mecha versus kaiju stuff. And when I'm done doing all this homework, this is my homework, when I watched it all up to whatever the last movie is for Godzilla and watched some Super Sentai stuff, once I've absorbed enough of this men in suits, mecha versus kaiju, then I'm going to make a short film or it not sure which yet, but the goal is to make a mech versus kaiju short film. It probably won't be a fan film. It might be just an original kind of my idea, but that's just what I want to do. I love filmmaking, and I'm watching all of this as part of my homework to make my next picture. And I'm having such a great time. I just watched Godzilla -1. That review probably came out before this one, where I also ranked it amongst the remake Godzillas, and it was on top, I'll tell you that. But today, let's see, in the last Godzilla Movies in Order reviewed, I talked about Gojira, Godzilla Raids Again. I might have referenced the American version of Godzilla. I know I talked about 98, Godzilla 98, because it was a very faithful adaptation of the first three Godzilla movies, which includes King Kong versus Godzilla. And the last one should have been Mothra. So that was a great time. All of that was great. And these movies, what I appreciate, they're very simple. But coming into Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, I think this movie is the first of this list. So I guess I'm going 4 movies at a time. I really loved the beginning of Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. We have these meteor showers that bring down a couple meteors that crash land on Earth, and they're more monsters for Godzilla to tango with. One of them is Rodan, the winged. I don't know what he is, but he's winged. Is he a bat? Is he a bird? Is he a pterodactyl? I don't really know. His head doesn't quite fit any of that, but his wings, I don't know what his wings fit either. But he's basically Godzilla in size, but with wings and no fire breath. And one of the other meteors that crash landed is Ghidorah, our three-headed monster, the title character. And what's beautiful is this movie starts off with this subplot. This is the first major human subplot. King Kong and Godzilla kind of had the pharmaceutical company trying to make a video to sell their new product, and hence them trying to get video of King Kong. It'll make you big and strong like King Kong, or whatever the heck they were doing. But it was really more of a parody. It was almost like what RoboCop did with OCP. But if you look at Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, we have the introduction of this sort of there's this kingdom. I assume it's Japanese. There's these two kingdoms that are fighting with each other, and we have our princess. I forget the character. I watched so many of these now. I've forgotten the character's name, but she's a princess who survives an assassination attempt. She's flying on a plane. She gets possessed by this feeling that she needs to jump out of the plane. And so she does. She jumps out of the plane just before it explodes. And so she, right from the beginning, like Attack of the Clones, Queen Amidala style, she has survived an assassination attempt on her life. And when she reemerges, you know, we're back to our news reporters. We have news reporters. Should I talk about Mothra? Did I really get through that with the giant egg? Well, Mothra had a giant egg. I don't know if I talked about the giant Easter egg and all the reporters, but our reporter characters from the Mothra movie return, and they're doing a little better now. They've moved up in life. They have a nice home. And but now suddenly they're brother and sister, which was not in that movie. And the brother ends up discovering the princess. She's dressed like a homeless person or a vagrant or something. And she's now claiming to be a princess of Venus, the last princess of Venus before Venus was destroyed. And she's warning the Earthlings, hey, you need to get out of this area because a great calamity is coming. And everywhere she goes, where she warns people, one of the monsters shows up and destroys those people. And the movie just has such a perfect flow, scene to scene. You see Ishirō Honda really nailed his buildup of the premise with the human characters interacting with the supernatural characters at this point, where although we don't see the kaiju up front, and that is one thing I kind of feel, with the exception of this movie, holds back most of these movies, is the kind of the characters just aren't engaging enough to really hold the 45-minute wait until this movie. I really feel like when they're like, where'd this princess go? She, you know, supposedly was supposed to be on this flight, but the flight was blown up, and then the very next thing you see is a crowd of people around a woman, and she just puts her finger up and says, everyone, you must listen to me. And the vagrant is the princess, and you must leave this area because it's about to blow up. And so the stories get around eventually to our reporters saying, hey, there's some woman who's going around telling people just doom and destruction are coming. And our lead reporter guy recognizes her from the photographs. She's the missing princess from this assassination attempt. And although she doesn't remember it, she thinks she's the last princess of Venus. Although she doesn't remember it, he does everything he can to protect her. And then there are these gangsters from the other warring family, whatever the situation is, who keep trying to kill her. And it's such an interesting subplot because essentially the monster plots are almost worn out, except now that they're being revealed as these meteor creatures, these creatures that came from someplace else, which which is interesting because Godzilla seems to be from Earth. There's, at least in the first 8 movies, no suggestion that Godzilla is an alien. It seems to be that he's a natural-born Earth monster. But Rodan comes from the meteor, and Ghidorah comes from the meteor. And our princess from Venus shows up at those sites and warns people, hey, this is all going to go bad, just before the monsters reveal themselves. And the Ghidorah reveal, up until the actual effect of it, was pretty cool. Until they reveal him in animation, and it's a really bad effect. It's really cool. But I really love that subplot. I just want to shout out the Ghidorah. Once Ghidorah gets in action, you start to really see the limits of the men in suits technology, which I think today's technology could solve. but at the time, it was the 50s, 60s. Actually, I believe we're in the 60s by Ghidorah. It was just wasn't there yet. But it's still cool seeing the destruction of the miniature sets. I think that is the joy. Because I mean, I collect toys. I love toys. I love toy ads where the little toy sets are being destroyed. And so for me, I get a big kick out of, here's a guy in a suit and he just waves his hand and smashes a building. And I'm like, I would love to have my own little town to destroy like that. And I think that's kind of the kick out of these movies is like, you get a physical thing to see in lighting get destroyed, and you still get the emotional impact of it most of the time because of how well it's filmed. But the effects do leave something to be desired in this final battle. Something that I think a different director picks up Ebirah and Son of Godzilla. And I think that's where things really change. Because when we get into Invasion of the Astro Monster, I really don't have as much to say about this movie. I was not as happy with this movie. I thought the Ghidorah movie had such a fantastic buildup, and the interaction between the humans and the beasts. Even in Ghidorah, we have Mothra returning, and Mothra basically brokers the deal for Godzilla to start becoming a hero and teaming up with Rodan to fight Ghidorah, who's basically both of them combined because it's a winged Godzilla. And although Ghidorah doesn't have fire breath, he has like lightning bolt breath. It seems to be even more destructive than Godzilla. So I thought, fantastic villain. The effects weren't quite there, but the building up of the story and the fact that it does get repetitive to just see Godzilla be the bad guy every time. I love seeing, this is where it turned. Ghidorah, King of the Monsters, is where Godzilla finally became the hero of humanity, which is kind of how I grew up with him. I grew up with my parents loving the old Godzilla movies, and Godzilla was a hero who fought the other monsters off and saved Japan. You didn't need a mecha team. Godzilla was your defense squadron, essentially. Like what's the line in The Princess Bride? Where's the brute? Where's the brute squad? I'm in the brute squad. You are the brute squad. It's like Godzilla's the brute squad. I mean, I grew up with Godzilla being the hero. I think, again, that's why the 98 movie for a lot of Godzilla fans was kind of a fail, because just like Spider-Man, these people grew up with this very specific type of Godzilla, and to watch that be walked back was kind of like, I don't know, and then the tone, well, I don't know, the Godzilla movies are pretty goofy once you start getting to the twins. The twins who show up in Mothra, they're the telepathic twins who both speak at the same time and sing to Mothra. They're part of that special heritage. They are the ones they're carried around in Ghidorah, and they're the ones who are letting the humans know, hey, Mothra is looking out for us. Mothra is trying to get Godzilla and Rodan to change their minds. And it's not until Godzilla actually says no. That's how you kind of know that Godzilla really is the main character, even though he's not we don't have the budget here for the movie to be wall-to-wall Godzilla walking around and having his own little character story. But he is essentially the main character because he refuses the call. He refuses the call to be a hero. And Rodan does not. Rodan joins Mothra in fighting Ghidorah. And that was such a cool little twist. But when Ghidorah seems to be winning, Godzilla's like, crap. I don't want to watch you guys get killed. I kind of feel more friend to you than the humans. So Godzilla reluctantly joins the fight like Han Solo. And the monsters save the day, and it's the first time Godzilla becomes a hero. Where Invasion of the Astro Monster really fails is that it's boring as hell. I do feel like Ishiro Honda is trying to do a Star Trek thing. He's trying to have very intelligent characters, but I just think the budget wasn't there. Our aliens are wearing these weird global things on their head. I think that's very strange. And they end up just mind controlling Godzilla and Rodan and turning them back into bad guys again anyway. So I'm not sure if there was some kind of storytelling conflict going on here. You know, a true kaiju fan probably knows. And if you do know the answer, if there's a video you can direct me to, hey, please let me know. I'd love to know if there's a reason why they went backward on Invasion of the Astro Monster. But it ends with our monsters all attacking everyone again, and Godzilla and Rodan have to be snapped out of their mind control from the monsters in order to become the heroes again. And it's just kind of a redundant movie. It feels like it's just there to keep the Godzilla brand going. It feels very slapped together. But I do feel like the special effects battle at the end is so incredible. I think Ishiro Honda really ends with a bang. This being the last movie he's directed I've seen so far. He really gives the finale all the punch he possibly can. Because the sense of scope across the movies, the sense of scope and scale kind of slips here and there. King Kong and Mothra and Ghidorah have some scale issues, but in general, I think Ishiro Honda really nails having a sense of how big these creatures are and how much destruction it would feel like, and we have all the extras running away. They really do capture the disaster movie so well. But that being said, Invasion of the Astro Monsters, not my favorite. But then we get to Ebirah. And now I did not look up this I did look up the director's name, but I forgot to write it down. I don't have it in my head. This is the first movie since Godzilla Raids Again, directed by a different director who's not Ishiro Honda. And you see that this guy really picks up the baton very well from what Ishiro Honda did. But he starts turning the wheel a little faster. Now with Ebirah, we get basically Ebirah action in not the first 10 minutes, but the first 20 minutes. So, okay, we're getting a little quicker to the monsters. We're not waiting so long for the monsters. The human plot is not too distracting. We're just getting right into the characters, what they need, what they want. It's just the plot is moving faster to get us to interact with these monsters, these kaiju. And Ebirah is the first one to show up, and it's a pretty cool, when you just see his claw, it's very cool. When you see the full Ebirah, again, I don't think it's the most successful effect. But what I think is great about this director is that he handles the action in a fantastic new way. He really puts the camera right up on Godzilla and Ebirah. And it's like Rocky before Rocky. He's like, no, this is a boxing match between two titans. But on their own scale, they're just person to person. So there's no need to worry about the scale once they're fighting. Just get in there and watch them fight. It's a total different attitude from Ishiro Honda's action scenes. And I think it makes really good action. Like, if anything, I would say, Godzilla -1 captures the scope, but gets the action sense from this director. Because Ebirah, again, it's another Godzilla movie. I think watching these movies in order is great because like the James Bond movies, you start to realize, okay, this is a formula, and the best movies don't necessarily break the formula, but they know how to play within the formula and do something creative and different. I really feel like Raids Again has the best ending until you get to Ghidorah, and it has the best subplot. So, here they are within the realm, finding a way to keep the human stories interesting with Ghidorah, by having this whole Venusian psychic plot. And then you get to Ebirah, and finally now the fight between the monsters is very visceral. I think the only time we really had that, because I don't think that, King Kong versus Godzilla it is a fairly good fight, but it doesn't feel quite that visceral. Again, I think Ishirō Honda really respects the scope and scale of the beasts and wants you to feel that, and he succeeds enormously at it. But I think when we get to Ebirah and seeing that sort of boxing match happen between Godzilla and Ebirah, it has such a different energy to it, and I realize this director knows how to handle the action sequences and to move the genre forward. Like, here we are in our special genre, in our special little show called Godzilla, but it needs to be moved forward. We can't just keep repeating the same stuff over and over again, even though that's the formula. We have to keep making it fresh. And I think Ebirah respects Ishirō Honda's work, while when it comes to the action, really gives us a much more vicious Godzilla. And like I said, it's like a fight we haven't had since Godzilla Raids Again, which had a different director as well. Godzilla Raids Again does the wise thing of, again, starting off. The very first 20 minutes features Godzilla versus, I don't know that monster's name yet, but he does apparently come back. But in Godzilla Raids Again, it starts off with Godzilla duking it out with this sort of tortoise with spikes on his back type of monster. And it is a kind of vicious battle that has a good sense of the scope, again, respecting what Ishirō Honda did with the scope and scale, but it's a much more brutal battle where Godzilla is literally just like bites down on that monster's neck and kills him. And it's so much more animalistic. I do wish we had kept some of that for the action going forward. But in Ebirah, it becomes more boxing match. I'm like, and that's cool. Like, good. Like, move the camera in there, get us in the action. And, spoiler alert, because I'm just talking about these movies as I see them. At the end of Ebirah, Godzilla rips both of his arms off and then plays with the claw. I'm like, yes, it gives Godzilla some character. I think, Godzilla is best as a character. He's just as much a character as anybody else. It just happens to be that he's the size of a mountain. That's all. I think the worst way to play Godzilla is just the dumb animal who's walking around and is kind of led in the correct direction. I think, no. And that's what I hate about the 2014 series, American series, is that Godzilla is just a big dumb animal who's kind of led around by what's going on, and he does not really have that inner core of what matters to him or what's interesting to him. And what I love about just seeing Ebirah, just that little bit of character, like, you miss your claw, Ebirah, you miss your claw, I got your claw. I mean, like, good. Godzilla has a sense of humor. And then even better, Son of Godzilla. This is what I've been building to. This is absolutely top of the list. I'm going to do a ranking of these movies. Son of Godzilla is top of the list for these original movies so far. The original Godzilla movies in order that I've been reviewing. I've enjoyed each one to varying degrees. I think Astro Monster's bottom of the list already. But Son of Godzilla is awesome because it starts off with the human characters, just gets right to it. A reporter lands on this island where a government experiment is occurring. It's always a reporter and a government experiment. But right away, right in the first 10 minutes, a kaiju shows up, and it's a giant praying mantis that's taller than a man, but not much taller than that. It's about 8 feet tall, and they're shooting at it, and they're all scared. And I thought, and that very much Godzilla -1 kind of starts off with that tone of shooting at something in the woods in the dark, and you can't quite tell what it is. It's very freaky. I really love that beginning because it just sets up the kaiju being there, and that's like a kaiju baby. Because later on we get the full-size praying mantises that are the size of Godzilla, And again, this is the same director as Ebirah. So the fact that we're getting action very early on, we're seeing the kaiju very early on. It's like now you've learned the lesson. I feel like, people talk about superhero fatigue. It's like, people get superhero fatigue every 10 years. You know why? Because the first 5 years, everyone's figuring out how to make a superhero movie. And the second 5 years, everyone's figured it out already. So now you're like, oh, okay. The most interesting part is when half the movies fail. But when all the movies are doing the same thing, that's when you lose interest. But I think a lot of the early superhero movies, especially if you look at the early 2000s, Hulk being one of the biggest letdowns. And I love Ang Lee's Hulk, but it does start off with an hour solid of not seeing the Hulk. And that's just not the genre we're in, baby. Like, this is a superhero genre. You guys start off with something, Even Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire gives us a little taste of the Spider-Man suit and the energy with the title sequence. And within the first 20 minutes, he gets bitten by the radioactive spider, and already things are changing for him. So he's not Spider-Man until the first hour, but at least we're getting into the genre elements right away, getting into the consequences of getting the spider powers and how they change him. All of that stuff it's smaller, but it builds up to him being Spider-Man very nicely. And to that end, I think, and it took them till 10 years. They didn't really get it right again until 2008 with Iron Man. Marvel struggled so hard with its heroes across all the movies and across all the studios, and the studios didn't believe in the filmmakers. That the Marvel had to be its own studio to get their own movies right, because studios they were run by people who aren't. If you're not a fan of the genre, you're not going to service it. And that was the problem, was that all we had was these crappy Ghost Rider movies, where when the superhero does show up, it's the worst thing you've ever seen, because the studio just doesn't get it, and they can't hire the right talent, or they can't guide the talent to do things in the most appropriately commercial way, because they're too busy being scared of the fact that someone will judge me because I'm making a superhero movie. I'm not going to make my money. You're too worried about all the wrong things that you're not committing to making the movie the way it should be made to actually reach the audiences. And I think, that's where 8 movies in, Godzilla finds its stride with Son of Godzilla. We're starting off with a praying mantis that's only a little bit taller than a man, just enough to scare you and freak you out a bit. And then they do their science experiment. There's a beautiful woman. I think the most beautiful since Akiko, who plays the princess from Venus in Ghidorah. Wow, this actress, I was like, oh my god, and beautiful. She's so beautiful, and she has a connection with Godzilla's son. It's so cool, like this. Another egg appears. 4 movies later, another egg appears, and the praying mantis kaiju have dug it out. And not only have they dug it out, they're trying to eat it. And the beautiful woman, who seems to be a native of the island or something, is there to watch Son of Godzilla emerge. And so she kind of becomes a friend to it in its infant baby stage. And I thought, that's beautiful. That's really nice. And it adds to the lore where Godzilla can be a friend of man. Because if your baby is safe and can consider a human a friend, then that's very much putting Godzilla in our friendship zone, where we're not enemies anymore. But it's such a nice connection because it's personal to her, because she watched Son of Godzilla get born, essentially. It's personal to her when Son of Godzilla is in danger from these giant monsters. But then we learn Godzilla has heard the call of his son. And Godzilla shows up to fight the praying mantises. And again, the action is awesome. And Godzilla is delimbing these motherfuckers. It's so good. He literally cuts off a praying mantis arm and chucks it across, and it's so cool. It's such a good time. I just had such a blast watching Son of Godzilla. It's my dad's favorite Godzilla movie, and now it's my favorite of what I've watched so far. I really thought, like, man, again, the action that this director puts into these movies, it really keeps it fresh. It really revitalized my interest because, seriously, by Astro Monsters, I was like, dude, how do you get to the stuff where my parents love this? Because I can't see them obsessing over these movies yet. But when we get to first, the Ebirah claw was hilarious. But my dad had showed me this clip long ago before I ever took an interest in the original Godzillas. He showed me the clip where Godzilla is with baby Godzilla, and he's trying to make baby Godzilla breathe fire for the first time. And Godzilla's like, look, it's like this. And then the baby's like, all he can get out is like a little burp of fire. And it's barely enough to spark any light in front of his mouth. And so Godzilla, frustrated with his son, steps on his son's tail, and baby Godzilla finally does his fire breath. It's such a shock and awe. It's such a terror of, he stepped on my tail, fire breath. But baby Godzilla takes that lesson, It's really beautiful seeing Godzilla save his son. And now Godzilla has his own storyline because he comes in to save his son from being eaten by the praying mantises. And to now watch in order the timeline building up to that scene that my dad showed, because I do remember loving that clip. It's such a nice father-son, and very relatable. I know there's plenty of times my dad tried to show me things and the frustration of, how are you a child of mine? You can't breathe fire? You know what I mean? I love that. But I love the one of the first things that happens once Godzilla wards away the praying mantis kaiju. He puts his tail down twice in front of his son, and Son of Godzilla doesn't get it, and Godzilla walks away, and then Godzilla has to come back because his son is still there, like, get on my tail. And he like whacks baby Godzilla with his tail, and baby Godzilla goes, oh, and then climbs onto the tail. And it's so cute. You realize that this is just from visual storytelling. You realize that Son of Godzilla, baby Godzilla, really just has no clue about anything, and you have to watch Godzilla train his son, and just to be alive in the first place. And so finally, in this first sequence, baby Godzilla has to learn, climb on daddy's tail so you can get around. Because what's adorable is he's adorable. Baby Godzilla is adorable. He doesn't have any scales. He basically looks like a turtle without a shell. It's so cute. And then across this movie, you watch baby Godzilla grow. You see him start to form some scales on his back, but it's not all over him yet. And then eventually, when his scales grow more, that's when we finally get to the scene of what my dad showed me, which is, this is how you do fire breath, son. And that's one of the amazing things is during the fight, Godzilla uses fire breath to chop off and burn one of the kaiju's, one of the praying mantis kaiju's arms off. And you see that flaming ligament go up in the air, and as the humans are running away, it smashes right next to them, and they're like, and they have to go around it. And that was just one of the great moments. I do feel like it's referenced in Lost World Jurassic Park when one of the trucks blows up and the guys jump out of the way just in time as it hits a tree. Kind of a double reference, maybe, I don't know. But I just love that moment because it makes the kaiju fight real when there's something that affects everything else. And it didn't have to be the limb crashing on a building and, oh my God, our work is and our home life is destroyed. No, they're just already running. They're in a field. It just hits near them in the field, and it's terrifying. And that's all you need. You don't need a lot. You just need those little touches that keep the action engaging for all the characters involved. Much like in Ghidorah, when we get to the final sequence, all the other hitmen have been killed in trying to kill Princess Venus. But in the final, last attempt to kill her, the hero is out of bullets in his gun, and the bad guy is not out of bullets in his gun, and they're just facing off from hillside to hillside, looking at each other. And finally, Ghidorah gets thrown into the rocks by Godzilla, and the rocks crash down on the last hitman. And that happens to be the moment when Princess Venus snaps out of it and is like, "You just saved my life," you know what I mean? And so, you know, stuff like that. You know, yes, the destruction is one element, and it's great to watch and all. But I love stuff like that where you see that limb hit the ground, and it doesn't even have to affect them directly. It doesn't have to kill anybody, but it's just a part of the fun. It's part of the ride. And the movie is such a great ride because, you know, we have really praying mantis monsters and spider monsters. All different kinds of monsters show up in this movie. I think the spider monster one is great because that's a sequence where Son of Godzilla is actually learning how to use his fire breath and get some agency with himself. And I don't want to spoil the ending to this movie, but you know, it seems like Godzilla's in peril, and so is Baby Godzilla. But they're holding each other as snowfall comes down on them, and it's such a beautiful image. I love this movie for it gives us a little bit of everything, lots of action, lots of great kaiju battles. The kaiju battles are shot in such a fresh, action-packed way that is like very similar to like the great action of the Hobbit movies. I love the action in the Hobbit movies. It's kind of like that, but for this time period with the men in suits. And I really loved how the action kept all the characters emotionally engaged as well. You know, again, Astro Monster did not do such a good job of that. I really felt like all the characters had something to live for, to fight for. Our scientists were trying to complete their experiment to save the world, whatever that means. You know, who knows if that's going to apply to the next movie. But then, you know, our reporter who lands there, he's the one that falls in love with the beautiful native girl. And so they have a little love story shown by the exchanging of their clothes. Like, he wears a shawl that she wears, and she wears his shirt, which is, you know what that means. But you know what I mean? Like, they have a love story, and the girl is also in love with Son of Godzilla, not in a romantic way, but just in, hey, I love this baby. I saw this baby be born. I don't want him to get hurt. And so, and watching Godzilla become a dad, and he's such an old school dad, but he really cares about his son, and he's there for his son. It's a really good father-son story. Perfect Father's Day movie, you know what I mean? It's everything you need to know about being a dad, in metaphor. It's just be there for your kid, you know what I mean? Just be there for your kid, protect them, and show them the right way. And things will be fine. So, ranking the Godzilla movies now. I love Son of Godzilla. It's number 1. Godzilla movies that I've watched in order, we're ranking them now. And I'm saying right now, top of the list, Son of Godzilla. Right beneath Son of Godzilla, I'm going to put Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. And below Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, I'm going to put Godzilla Raids Again, because it's got a really nice story with the pilot. I really like how that ties up. And then Godzilla, the original, directed by Ishirō. And then I'm going to put Ebirah. And then I'm going to put... No, I'm going to put Mothra, then Ebirah. And then at the very bottom, I'm putting Invasion of the Astro Monster, which was kind of boring. And that's my ranking so far of the Godzilla movies. Next one, I'll be ranking the monsters. Thank you very much for watching.